welcome to another episode of Esoteric Agenda. Before we get started, I'm going to check the channels, make sure everything is up and running the way it's supposed to be running. Check the audio. I heard my audio on Rumble. Yeah, so I know that's running good. I am checking YouTube as well. I'm going to make sure the audio sounds good. And I also have to make sure that it's on the playlist that it's supposed to be going to with a thumbnail. So get that taken care of real quick and get on with the show. So actually, I keep forgetting where my thumbnails are because I got two spots where I put them, so it's pretty messed up. Tonight is the second to the last stream for this season of Esoteric Agenda, and I'm debating if I want to do like a recap because I've enjoyed doing this series a lot, and um, I think I've done a really good job, but I don't think it would be complete if I did a recap because I haven't covered the Neoplatonists, and they were very very profound when it came to a lot of the esoterics and things of that nature. So I'm debating on it. Next week we'll know, but I'm really on the fence about it because usually what I do is I do 12 video series, and then on the 12th one I usually have a recap like I did here with the 6th episode, but I'm really debating on it. So let me go ahead and finish. Yeah, it sounds good on Kick. Now DLive always gives me problems, so I may have to go without streaming on DLive. It's a pain in the ass. It always is. So let me see if I have to refresh or something of that nature. And sorry, I am a couple minutes late too as well. But that's the kind of thing you have to put up with when it comes to these lazy streamers who don't know how to be on time and efficient. They're just horrible. So yeah, it looks like we are not going to have a stream tonight on DLive, which is fine. I mean, I'm getting sick of having to babysit this channel. So with that being said, we are on, this is Esoteric Agenda. And well, actually, I should probably do my introduction and everything that way. We have it sounding good for, well, I don't have to do all that. I was going to do the countdown. I keep forgetting that in my edited version, I don't even do the introductions and stuff. So, yeah. So, welcome to to Esoteric Agenda here on the wonderful world of weirdness. I am Roger Hanson, your host, and today we are going to go even further into the esoterics. I was saying, like I said before, I was debating on doing a recap for my 12th episode because I have enjoyed this stream quite a bit, and we have gotten to a lot of good people that were involved in what we call the esoterics. Now, the esoterics is Hellenistic. It's also Masonic, Hermeticism, however you want to call it, um, as well as Egyptian and the Arabs. Now, there's a lot of things that play out in that. Like I went through the Pythagorean system last week and kind of gave you uh, a little bit of information there. I've covered um, quite a bit actually of the Arab philosophers, and what I wanted, or I mentioned Asanas as well. Now, Asanas is a very, very important character within the realms of magic, um, alchemy, spirituality, how a lot of that. Um, I also mentioned Al-Kindi. Now, Al-Kindi is a big influence when it comes to the esoterics, but uh, Habir Ibn Hayyanis is somebody that I mentioned last week. Now, he contributed quite a bit. If you search these people out, you'll find a lot of things that aren't really mentioned when it comes to the esoterics and when it comes to things like alchemy, magic, astrology, sacred geometry, and stuff like that. I started out and I ended up, when I first started getting into this, I got into the Pythagoras, and I also got into Neoplatonism and things of that nature. But I really didn't grasp a lot about what was being said until I started really getting into this stuff and learning it. Like you can go and you can read the texts and hear the incantations and the ceremonies and the rituals and stuff like that, but you're still not getting a full grasp of what the esoterics are really about until you start reading things like the 10 books of rectification, or things of that nature. Um, the 70 books, you know what I mean? Which is another one that's important. And I brought these up in the last episode. These are the books where you find out what's really going on there, And I've noticed that there's like two camps of people when it comes to the esoterics. There's the people who believed in the esoterics and they support it. And then there were the people who were against the esoterics who spoke out against it and tried to make it out to be evil and this, cabal of evildoers who are trying to take over the world. And it's your choice how you want to choose all of it. But when you sit down and you do the actual research, I mean, the truth is right there in your face. You know what I mean? Um, I've done this for years now, and I can honestly tell you that the esoterics have nothing to do with an evil cabal who's trying to take over the world and dominate you. It's actually the opposite. The people who are making these claims are actually supporting the people who want to take over the world and dominate you. You know what I mean? Like the the one big thing that I take from the esoterics is the fact that these people had to go into hiding and they had to uh, practice what they believed, because if they weren't doing that, they would have been murdered. They would have been executed for sacrilege or all of the nice, beautiful things that a lot of the um, religious believers were against. You know what I mean? And this isn't just Christianity. This is Muslims, the Muslim beliefs. This is also the Buddhists, all of them. A lot of the stuff that's being taught in the esoterics are things that were, well, like today, we can have a conversation about this stuff and have no consequences, right, right now. You know what I mean? But if you did this 1,200 years ago, even, they would have put you to death. How dare you speak such blasphemy? If you'd done this stuff 2,000 years ago, it would have been the same consequence. So with me, I have to take that into consideration when it comes to um, the stuff. I have to put myself in those situations, kind of make myself think like a person who would have lived that long ago, and what they would have had to go through and the things that they would have had to worry about. So kind of keep that in mind. This stuff is pretty passive compared to most stuff that you hear on the internet. But at the same time, this stuff was very, very dangerous during that time period. You didn't speak such things, and you had to be very, very secretive. That's why they had the mystery schools and they had the esoterics and all of that, because of that fact. Hypatia is a good example. I've mentioned her before. Hypatia, she was just a scientist, and because of her belief in science and the accolade, which the Catholic Church felt was a form of magic, she was drug out into the streets of Alexandria and dismembered. You know what I mean? During a riot. And let's not get into the whole story of how the early Christians desecrated, you know, the the Egyptian tombs and temples, and replaced all of ancient Egyptian artifacts with Christian artifacts. And then after they did it, the Muslims moved in, did the same thing. So there was a lot of these beliefs that were causing people to die because of it, and they had to go into hiding and uh, not speak of it publicly. So that is something that I did want to bring up. I really do enjoy doing this stuff. I do a lot of different content, but I really, for some reason, man, I really fell in love with the esoterics. It's an amazing topic. If you guys want to learn from somebody who is a lot more smarter than I am, I suggest that you go to a YouTube channel called Esoterica. Now, this guy is amazing when it comes to the esoterics. Go in there, learn some stuff from him, and gain a little bit of knowledge. He'll go through the text and explain it to you in detail. So, um, he doesn't know me from Adam, so I'm not doing a plug for him or anything. I respect the guy. I know he's really good with the information that he's putting out, and that's the only reason why I'm doing it. So with that, I'm going to get on to this week's topic, and it's only going to be about one person, kind of like last week. Now, this might not be an hour long, but it's worth only being as long as what it turns out to be, because it's just this guy, and he was a very, very profound person when it came to the esoterics and ancient alchemy. That is Zosimos of Panopolis. Now, this man is he deserves to have just one episode dedicated to him. That's how profound he was. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the topic, and I hope you guys enjoy. Zosimos of Panopolis was an influential figure in the history of alchemy, mysticism, and esoteric thought. He lived during the late 3rd or early 4th century in Panopolis, a city in Upper Egypt, which was a melting pot of Egyptian, Hellenistic, and early Christian philosophies. Zosimos is widely regarded as one of the earliest authors whose alchemical texts survive in substantial form. He wrote in Greek and is credited with synthesizing earlier Egyptian practice with Hermetic philosophy and Neoplatonic cosmology. His writings are often dense with spiritual allegory, dream imagery, and symbolic language, suggesting that Zosimos alchemy suggesting that for Zosimos, alchemy was not merely a chemical art, but a sacred science involving the transformation of the soul. Zosimos saw alchemy not only as the transformation of base metals into noble ones, but also as a spiritual process that mirrors the purification and perfection of the practitioner's soul. He taught that the operations of the alchemical furnace represented the inner trials and sufferings of the human soul. He often described the elements and instruments of the alchemical laboratory in terms that were rich with spiritual significance. For example, fire was not merely a heat source, but a purifying and consuming divine force. The alembic, or distillation vessel, represented the body, and the divine essence, or pneuma, was the spirit trapped within, which needed release through proper ritual, knowledge, and transformation. One of the most famous of Zosimos' surviving works is his Visions or Dreams, in which he recounts a series of mystical experiences that occur in the context of an initiatory journey. In one such vision, he sees a priest standing beside an altar, who is then violently dismembered and consumed in fire. The vision repeats with different variations, each carrying deep spiritual symbolism. Zosimos interprets the dream as a representation of the spiritual death and rebirth necessary to attain true wisdom. The sacrifice of the priest represents the alchemist's own ego being torn apart and purified, and only by undergoing this suffering can the soul be reborn into divine knowledge. He often used the figure of the inner man as a central image of spiritual alchemy. For Zosimos, this inner man was a spiritual identity hidden beneath the surface of the corrupt material self. Alchemy was thus a process of shedding the dross of worldly identity and recovering the radiant form of the spiritual being. He combined Platonic ideas of the soul's fall and the redemption with Egyptian temple rituals, where the initiate was required to undergo symbolic death before being reborn into higher understanding. Zosimos's writings frequently mention the use of sacred letters, strange names, and invocations that appear to draw from both Greek and Semitic magic traditions. These included phrases and names similar to the Vocus Magicae found in the Greek magical papyri, suggesting a strong overlap between mystical alchemy and liturgical practice. His texts describe divine beings or demons who assist or hinder the alchemist, reinforcing the idea that the laboratory is a sacred space akin to a temple. He also emphasizes the use of dreams and visions as a form of divine communication. Rather than merely analyzing physical substance, the true alchemist was one who opened himself to mystical insights through fasting, prayer, and inner contemplation. These visions were not random, but followed patterns that revealed the hidden architecture of the cosmos and the steps necessary to return the soul to its origin. Zosimos was deeply influenced by Hermetic writings, especially those attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. I always have a hard time saying that. Trismegistus. And he often quoted or paraphrased from Hermetic dialogues. He shared the Hermetic view that the material world is a reflection of a divine order, and that the human being, as a microcosm, contains within themselves the same structure found in the heavens. The fall of humanity, in this view, was a descent into matter and forgetfulness, and the goal of alchemy was to reverse this fall through gnosis and sacred transformation. His work often include commentary on other alchemical texts, suggesting that he operated in a milieu where sacred knowledge was transmitted through encoded symbols and allegory. He referred to earlier Egyptian sages and to esoteric figures who taught in veiled languages to preserve the sanctity of the mysteries. He warned that those without spiritual discipline could not understand the deeper meanings of alchemy and might misuse the art for selfish gain or illusion. In his explanation of the substances used in alchemy, Zosimos often assigned them spiritual attributes. Mercury, for instance, was not merely a metal, but the soul in its fluid, shape-shifting state. Sulfur represented the divine fire, or the animated spirit. Lead was associated with the heavy, sinful aspects of the self that needed to be transformed. Gold, in his view, was both a noble metal and the perfected soul, radiant and incorruptible. Zosimus also described a set of alchemical processes that had both physical and metaphysical dimensions. Calcination represented the burning away of impurities, corresponding to the spiritual suffering of repentance. Distillation was the lifting up of the purified soul. Sublimation meant the elevation of the soul to a higher realm, and coagulation symbolized the reuniting of spirit and matter into a new harmonious being. His concept of the living water, or divine dew, a substance created in the alchemical work, has parallels in Gnostic and early Christian writings about the water of life and spiritual rebirth. This substance was said to purify all things and to contain the essence of the divine. Zosimos did not treat this water as a mere chemical mixture, but as a sacrament, a kind of holy distillation of divine presence. One of the most striking features of Zosimos's alchemical system is its emphasis on moral and ethical purification. The alchemists must not only master the elements and understand the sacred texts, but must also live a life of humility, truth, and self-control. Without this moral foundation, the alchemical work would fail, and the practitioner would fall prey to illusions and demonic forces. He taught that true transformation could only occur in those who were spiritually prepared. In the esoteric and alchemical teachings of Zosimus of Panopolis, the term pneuma plays a central role in understanding both the structure of the cosmos and the interior mechanics of spiritual transformation. Pneuma is often translated as breath or spirit, but its meaning goes far deeper than a simple physical or theological term. It represents the animating force of the universe, the subtle substance that links matter with the divine. Within the alchemical framework of Zosima's pneuma is not just life force, in the biological sense, but a divine essence that pervades all things and serves as the bridge between the material and the spiritual realms. Zosimos, along with other thinkers of the Hermetic and Neoplatonic schools, believed that pneuma was infused into the cosmos at the moment of creation. It was seen as a universal breath that animates the heavens, the elements, and the human soul alike. Just as the cosmos is alive with movement, transformation, and hierarchy, so too does pneuma circulate through all levels of existence, carrying divine intelligence and sustaining life in all its forms. This circulation was not random. It was governed by sacred law and order, mirroring the celestial movements of the stars and planets, which in turn were thought to influence the condition of the earthly plane. In human beings, pneuma was believed to reside in the soul, particularly within the intermediary layer between the divine spark and the corporeal body. It was regarded as the vessel through which divine impressions could be received. but also as the medium through which internal transformation could be accomplished. The state of the pneuma within a person determined their ability to perceive truth, communicate with divine intelligences, and attain spiritual rebirth. A corrupted or darkened pneuma would obscure divine vision, trap the soul, trap the soul in the illusion of matter, and hinder ascent. A purified pneuma, on the other hand, would rise like sacred vapor, returning to its celestial origin. Zosimo described the alchemical work as a symbolic mirror of the inner purification of the pneuma. The furnace, the vessel, and the fire were not no the. Let me start over. Zosimos described the alchemical work as a symbolic mirror of this inner purification of the pneuma. The furnace, the vessel, and the fire were not merely tools for transforming metals, but were metaphors for the transformation of the self. The body of the alchemist was the vessel, the fire was divine knowledge or tribulation, and the pneuma was the essence that must be released from its confinement in material impurity. The entire alchemical operation was thus a drama of liberation in which the pneuma is awakened, refined, and returned to its source. The spiritual crisis faced by the alchemist was one of fragmentation. According to this worldview, the pneuma had fallen into a state of confusion due to the soul's entanglement with matter. This fall was echoed in the mythic language Zosimos often employed, such as the image of the priest who was dismembered and burned upon the altar. This priest symbolizes the sacrificial aspect of the self, the necessity of dissolving the ego and base nature to release the true inner spirit. The sufferings of the alchemist reflected the agony of the pneuma, trapped within a world of decay and change, longing to return to the higher world of unity and light. Zosimos's references to the living water, the divine dew, or sacred vapors often imply the elevation or restoration of the pneuma. These spiritual substances were not chemical connections, but sacred energies. The living water, for instance, was believed to be drawn down from the divine heavens, condensing in the soul during prayer, ritual, or alchemical labor. When properly cultivated, it nourished the pneuma, remaining stagnant and vulnerable to corruption by passions, ignorance, or worldly attachments. The pneuma was also seen as a conductor of divine voice. It was through the pneuma that oracles were heard, dreams received, and visions experienced. In this sense, the pneuma was a sacred receiver, and its purity determined the clarity of the divine message that could pass through it. It acted much like a glass lens. When clean and polished, it could reflect the true light of heaven. When darkened or clouded, it could it could distort the image and lead the soul into confusion. Because of its centrality in connecting the material with the divine, the pneuma was often associated with intermediary spirits or daemons. These daemons were not always malevolent. In many esoteric systems, including those echoed in Zosimos's writings, daemons could be protectors, guides, or teachers who interacted with the pneuma to deliver messages or prompt awakening. However, the nature of these interactions depended on the moral and spiritual condition of the individual. A defiled pneuma might attract chaotic or misleading spirits, while a purified pneuma would align with divine messengers or celestial intelligences. The purification of pneuma involved a moral and intellectual process. Zosimos emphasized that no true alchemical transformation could occur unless the practitioner also lived a life of integrity, self-discipline, and contemplation. It was not enough to know the techniques of mixing substances or controlling fire. The alchemist must also undergo personal suffering, reflection, and spiritual testing. Only through these trials could the pneuma shed its contamination and rise to its original brightness. Fasting, ritual washing, chanting sacred names, and engaging with mystical texts were all ways that the alchemists prepared the pneuma for ascent. Symbolically, Zosimos referred to the journey of the pneuma as a return to the source. This mirrored the broader Neoplatonic cosmology in which all things emanated from the One and longed to return to it. The alchemist's art was thus a small echo of the cosmic cycle. As metals move toward perfection and as the soul moved towards union with the divine, so too the pneuma ascended from its low condition in the body and rejoined the divine breath that moves through all of creation. In his writings, Zosimos described various states of the pneuma, such as thickened, diluted, fiery, or luminous. These were not abstract qualities, but direct reflections of the soul's moral and spiritual status. A thickened pneuma was weighed down by desire, ignorance, or vice. A fiery pneuma was awakened, passionate, and capable of vision. A luminous pneuma was radiant with divine presence, no longer obstructed by the limitations of flesh. Alchemical text encoded these transformations through the metaphors of chemical change, such as the blackening, whitening, yellowing, and reddening stages, which mapped into the soul's journey through suffering, purification, illumination, and spiritual perfection. The pneuma was tied to the esoteric idea of the resurrection of the spiritual body. In Zosimos's worldview, the body was not entirely corrupt, but rather a vessel that could be sanctified through the work of the soul in the pneuma. The resurrected body was not a material one, but one of spirit and fire, shaped by the perfected pneuma. This idea had echoes in earlier Gnostic and Hermetic teachings, where salvation was achieved not through escape from the body, but through its transformation into a vessel of divine light. The pneuma the pneuma in Zosimo's alchemical tradition was more than breath or spirit. It was the very breath of the divine, seated within creation, hidden in the depths of matter, and waiting to be awakened through suffering, vision, and sacred labor. Zosimos of Panopolis left behind a number of surviving fragments and treatises that reflect his deep engagement with visions and dreams, many of which have been preserved in Greek, Syriac, and Arabic manuscripts. These works are not merely abstract reflections or didactic texts about alchemy in the physical sense, but are filled with mystical allegories, dream sequences, and visionary encounters that depict a profoundly esoteric worldview. His texts often blur the boundaries between physical operations, psychological processes, and spiritual transformations, using dream imagery and symbolic narratives to convey deeper truths that cannot be grasped through rational explanations alone. One of the most remarkable examples of this approach is found in his Visions of Zosimos, sometimes referred to as the Book of the Keys of the Work, or the Final Abode. This text, or rather this series of visionary episodes, follows Zosimos as he undergoes a sequence of vivid dream-like experiences that serve both as spiritual instruction and initiatory ordeal. In these visions, Zosimos encounters symbolic figures, sacrificial priests, and alchemical processes that play out in surreal and often violent fashion. These these dream encounters are filled with unsettling images, such as a priest who is dismembered and burned alive in a furnace, and deeply symbolic actions, including transformation, resurrection, and ascension. Each episode serves as a layer in the unfolding revelation of alchemical truths, delivered not through linear explanation, but through dramatic mystical experiences. In one of the most striking episodes, Zosimos dreams of a temple where he sees a man referred to as the priest of the inner sanctum. This figure steps forward, only to be seized by others, dismembered, and thrown into a cauldron where he is boiled down into a purified state. This disturbing but symbolic image was explained by the priest himself, who is then revealed to be a manifestation of Zosimos' higher self. He tells Zosimos that the dismemberment is the sacrifice required to purify the soul and liberate the spirit from the dross of the body. It is through fire and dissolution that the spirit is refined and reunited with the divine source. This moment does not just illustrate a physical alchemical process, but a psychological and spiritual one. The death of the false self, the sacrifice of lower impulses, and the awakening of the divine inner being. In another vision, Zosimo sees a figure whose body changes color in stages, reflecting the alchemical progress of the magnum opus. These stages, often described in terms such as blackening, whitening, yellowing, and reddening, are presented through living symbols in his visions. The changing hues represents the soul's movement through despair, purification, illumination, and finally spiritual rebirth. Zosimo sees not just chemical transformations, but the soul's own suffering and elevation mirrored in these stages. The dream figure explains that each color is a veil to be pierced, a gate to be passed through, and a reflection of the soul's condition as it undergoes the alchemical trial of awakening. Many of Zosimos's visions include encounters with feminine figures who serve as guides, vessels of transformation, or guardians of sacred knowledge. In one episode, he meets a woman who identifies herself as the nature of the world, clothed in radiant fire and holding a cup. She tells Zosimos that the contents of the cup will either purify or destroy, depending on the state of the one who drinks it. This woman is not merely an allegorical figure, but a representation of divine nature, what some traditions would identify as Sophia, the anima mundi, or the world soul. Her presence in Zosimos's dreams indicates the necessity of communion with the divine feminine in the alchemical journey and the paradoxical nature of spiritual transformation, which can both heal and burn away the unworthy. These dreams are not isolated from the greater cosmological and philosophical ideas Zosimos held. They are woven into the Hermetic and Neoplatonic ideas of divine descent and return, the fragmentation of the soul, and the aspiration for unity with the divine source. His dreams also draw on earlier Gnostic motifs, especially the idea that the soul is trapped in layers of illusion or material entrapment and must be awakened through gnosis, a direct experiential knowledge often achieved through visionary experience or ecstatic transformations. Zosimos's dream visions are not simply inner journeys. They are revelations of universal processes encoded in symbolic language. He also explores the idea that metals and minerals have spiritual counterparts. He also explores the idea that metals and minerals have spiritual counterparts, and that their purification in the furnace mirrors the purification of the soul. In one vision, Zosimos witnesses the melting of metal as a symbol of inner confession and transformation. The metal weeps and cries out as it is consumed by fire, a metaphor for the soul's agony in confronting its own impurities. Through this dream, Zosimus learns that the alchemist must not only understand external elements, but must first face his own darkness. Only through symbolic death can rebirth occur. One of the most recurring themes in his dream text is the circulatory of the work, the idea that the alchemical process, like the spiritual path, moves in spirals or cycles. The dreams often end where they begin, returning to the original temple, the furnace, or the vision of the inner priest. But each return carries with it a deepening understanding. What was once obscure becomes transparent, and what was once frightening becomes illuminating. This circular path reflects the Hermetic teaching that the journey is not linear but recursive, where each stage of realization brings the seeker closer to divine center hidden within the self. His visionary text also makes use of apocalyptic and mystical language, suggesting that true understanding cannot be given in words but must be experienced through suffering, contemplation, and grace. The dream visions are riddled with paradoxes and contradictions, which are meant to awaken the reader from ordinary thought and into a state of mystical contemplation. Fire is both destroying and purifying. Death is both an end and a beginning. As Zosimus journeys deeper into these dream worlds, the barriers between outer reality and inner truth begin to dissolve, revealing a universe where the material and the spiritual are interwoven. These dream texts also serve as teaching tools, not just for solitary meditation, but for initiates in the alchemical or philosophical schools that surrounded him. They were read aloud, meditated upon, and interpreted by generations of mystics, philosophers, and spiritual alchemists. The dream of the priest, the furnace, the cup-bearing goddess, and the living metals would each become part of the broader language of esoteric transformation that passed through late antiquity into Arabic, Latin, and eventually European alchemical traditions. Yeah. Now, when I first read about Zosimus, this man just completely amazed me. Now I have photos that I have uh, snagged from the internet from, and I did that a long time ago, where it shows the symbolism that this is discussing about, you know, the man being freaking uh, basically dismembered and being burned. You know what I mean? And it's really an eye opener when you look at it. There's a lot of symbolism in the old esoteric photos and paintings and stuff like that, whatever they are, that really you don't pick up on at first. Now, the only way to really understand it is to get into a lot of the things that's been discussed here. And I also discussed a lot of it too before, like the the colors, about the white, the black, the redding, and the yellow. That's very, very important when it comes to alchemy. Um, Also, when it comes to suffering, the thing that really sticks out to me about suffering is what I've been learning when it comes to alchemy. Also, when it comes to Buddhism especially, they are really big on teaching people that through suffering, um, you you learn to overcome, and when you overcome, you ascend to a higher level of consciousness. Or in Hinduism, they also talk about another realm of where you go through. So that's something that really, really sticks out to me. And I've mentioned it before too, where I can see tons and tons of ancient alchemy that's actually a part of what we call religion today, especially when it comes to Jesus and the resurrection. That's straight up ancient alchemy, 100%. It just resonates with it, and the more I read on these about these ancient philosophers that were around way, way before Jesus was supposed to be here on Earth, the more I really believe that a lot of the stuff they're teaching about Jesus was ancient alchemy. A lot of beliefs in these religions. If you really do the research and you find out, you'll see that there is ancient alchemy within these religious texts that are just everywhere. And that's not taking away from Jesus or Buddha or any of these other religions. It's adding to it. You know what I mean? It's bringing a different element. I believe that a lot of people have this misconception that like we come from a golden age where everything was beautiful and stuff, and I still do not believe that. I do a lot of research into history, and I do not see a point in history where we came from a golden age. What I do see is a lot of connections, a lot of things that can't be explained today. Like why these certain beliefs are all over the world. They're when during that time period, they shouldn't have even been there. I've mentioned it before with the bird and the reptile connection. That seems to be one of the strongest things that seems to reflect all around the world for thousands of years. This bird reptile connection, and you can see it almost in every culture, but it's not explainable. People don't know why that's the case, but it is there. And when I read these um, texts, it just blows my mind. It's like his interpretation of the living water. You know what I mean? And the whole thing about the breath, spiritual rebirth, water of life. It's completely amazing. So if you guys are really into wanting to learn this stuff, you have to learn about Zosimos. This man was amazing. He was very, very influential when it comes to alchemical writing. And he was also into magic. He was into, the esoterics, all of that. Very good stuff. Now, I wanted to try to talk as long as I can so that I could make it to an hour. I think my big mouth finally accomplished that. Um, Thank you, Galactic Fire, Sonia, for the smiley face in chat. I appreciate that very much. Um, this time I actually did put the stream in the proper category. I had a guy come in who saw my previous stream in the gaming selection, and I had to apologize to everybody in the gaming selection because, first of all, it was on Rumble Premium, and I'm sure they didn't like that. But second of all, you just you don't you don't put anything but gaming on a gaming category. I learned that a long time ago. Those gamers are mean. So, well, I game too, so I know how they are. So, whenever I did it this time, I did my midnight episode. I made sure that I put it in the right category. Now, like I said at the beginning of the stream, this is Esoteric Agenda on the wonderful world of weirdness. You can find the wonderful world of weirdness on Rumble as well as on YouTube. On YouTube, it is the wonderful world of weirdness at the wonderful world of weirdness, and just I guess the wonderful world of weirdness by itself on Rumble. If you guys want to find me elsewhere, you can find me at Roger_Hansen on Kick, as well as on DLive. I believe it's under Roger_Hansen. Now on Twitch, I am not Roger Hansen. I am actually Infamous 1969, and that is also my main account on Rumble. It's Infamous OG 1973. Or, yeah, 1977 at Infamous OG 1973. It's my gamer name, just so you guys know. And you can find me there too. So I am on X, but I'm not streaming on there anymore. So if you guys do want to contact me, you can find me on X at Roger Hansen at ROGLOL 1973. Besides that, I am on Teams uh, at Live with Roger Hansen, and I am also on Discord. I have my own Discord channel there called The Wonderful World of Weirdness. If you guys want to come in and hang out with us, be a part of the community, share your feedback, tell your stories, things of that nature, you're more than welcome to join us on The Wonderful World of Weirdness on Discord. We also have a WoW, WWOW, on Elements Matrix. You guys can check us out there as well. So we've got a lot of things going on, and you guys are welcome to join us at any time. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share, make comments in the comment sections, guys, down below. You don't even realize how important that is for a person whenever they get a comment in the comment section that actually is a person saying hello, you know what I mean, rather than a bunch of bots trying to sell you subscribers or giving you 5 million views. That drives me nuts. When somebody actually leaves me a message in the comment section, I'm happy, dude. I love it because that means I get to talk to somebody. And it doesn't even have to be about the topic. Just say hello, have a conversation with me. You know what I mean? I'm a big mouth, if you haven't noticed. So again, thank you for stopping by, Miss Sonia. Galactic Fire T-shirts, and I will talk to you guys later. I hope you have a good night, morning, afternoon, whatever time of the day it is for you. And I'll see you later. Thanks for stopping by.